Hey guys, Josh here with another video. I'm out back in Adventureland. I thought I'd play a little putt putt. You want to come with me? Let me line up my shot here. Oh, so close. Anyway, I was also thinking about humility, and we have chances every day to show humility to people around us, no matter what we might be doing. For some, it may be letting someone play through when you're on a mini golf course, and letting them go in front of you. Does that sound easy to show humility? It's not, but it helps when we think about how Jesus showed humility for us. So last week we celebrated Easter, and when Jesus came out of that tomb, he changed everything. He changed the way people thought about God. He made a way for us to have a relationship with God without our sin being in the way. And that's not all. Jesus also changed the way people thought about how they should treat others. The Apostle Paul later wrote about that in a letter he wrote to a church in Philippi. We call it the book of Philippians. Paul wrote this letter for a bunch of reasons, one of which was that he couldn't visit the Philippians himself because he was in prison. Paul loved to remind people of Jesus' example. He wanted to encourage them to live as Jesus did. In Philippians chapter 2, it says, "Don't do anything only to get ahead. Instead, be humble. Value others more than yourselves. As you deal with one another, you should think and act as Jesus did." Jesus was equal with God, but Jesus didn't take advantage of that. Instead, he made himself nothing. He did this by taking on the nature of a servant. He appeared as a man. He was humble and obeyed God completely. He did this even though it led to his death. And those are really wise words. Notice that Paul went back to Jesus' example. He said that we should look at the ways Jesus showed humility, and then we can choose to be humble ourselves. But what does it really look like to live that way? What does it look like to value others more than yourselves? We're going to look at a few scenarios today. Now, I know no one watching this video has ever acted selfishly, and none of you have ever let your feelings get out of control and said something you wish you hadn't, but maybe, just maybe, you've experienced something like this. So there was one time Leslie and I had to do something upstairs. I think we were cleaning out the boys' room, and we came downstairs before we got started, and we asked one of them, I'm not going to mention names here because most of you know who I'm talking about, but we asked one of them who happened to be on an iPad at the time. He was watching Disney Plus or something like that. And I told him, I said, I need you to clear the table and set it for supper because we're going to be having supper soon. He said, okay. So we went upstairs, finished our project upstairs. 30 minutes later, we come downstairs. Guess what? We look at the table. Nothing had been done. And the person, one of our boys who I had asked to do this, was still sitting in the same place watching the iPad. And I'm like, pal, you haven't done this yet. What's going on? Does this look like something that might happen at your house? Yeah, I'm thinking it might. Sometimes you get so wrapped up in what you're doing that it's hard to pay attention to stuff around you. You forget to do simple things that you're supposed to do, like homework or chores, things your parents ask you to do. When you're thinking about yourself, you definitely don't have time to think about other people and what they might need. So how do we stop thinking of ourselves and start putting others first? Well, let's think about what Paul wrote in his letter. We can start by remembering what Jesus did for us. Then we can choose to follow his example. We can be humble and show others that they're important, by taking our eyes off the screen, listening, and actually looking at them when they talk to us. So let's take a look at another scenario and see if this sounds familiar. I'm guessing everybody watching knows someone who brags. And if you know someone like this, you've probably and maybe been involved in what I call the one-up challenge. Like your friend might say something like, oh man, for my birthday, I got this brand new bike and it was so awesome and I was so excited. And then you're like, well, dude, that's pretty cool, but for my birthday, I got a bike and a Nintendo Switch. So after you say that, maybe there's another friend standing close by and he says, oh yeah, well, for my birthday, I got a bike, a Nintendo Switch, and Justin Bieber came over to my house and hung out with us all day. So That's bragging with a dash of exaggeration. Instead of bragging, maybe you could just let your friend enjoy the moment and him telling everyone about his birthday. Like Paul wrote in his letter, it helps when you think back and remember what Jesus did for you. Jesus didn't take advantage of the fact that he's God's son. Instead, he always looked to serve others. Remember, Paul said it this way: Jesus was equal with God, but Jesus didn't take advantage of that. Instead, he made himself nothing. He did this by taking on the nature of a servant. So I have one last scenario for you, and this might hit home too. I remember when I was little, and I'm the oldest of 3 brothers, and we always had this thing whenever we went someplace with mom and dad and one or the other wasn't around, it was just mom or dad driving, we would always run to the car and fight over who was going to get to sit shotgun. That probably sounds familiar, right? So we would almost like get in fist fights trying to get in that front seat. Now I don't even want to be in the front seat, but anyway, that was something that we always kind of had when I was little. We would always argue over that. And does that sound a little bit familiar? If you have siblings, you can probably relate. And sometimes family members are the ones who push our buttons the most. In your family, maybe you feel like you never get to do things your way. Maybe you even bicker with your siblings. Maybe you even roll your eyes once in a while at your parents. We get frustrated sometimes, and that's normal. But it's not okay to be selfish or to completely lose your temper because you're not getting the thing you want or what you want to do. I know this is tough, and it's tough to do when it comes to your family. It's difficult to choose to be humble when your brother or your sister is doing something they can, or whatever they can do to annoy you. But I know how you can start. It's like Paul said in his letter. You can start by thinking about Jesus. When you remember everything Jesus did for you, it's easier to follow his example. Then, as hard as it might be, you can choose to put your brother or your sister first. Remember what Paul wrote. This is in Philippians 2 also. As you deal with one another, you should think and act as Jesus did. There's a question that people used to ask years ago, don't even remember how long ago it was, but it's still a good way to think about today. It was WWJD. People would walk around with the little bracelets, WWJD, and that stood for what would Jesus do? In the moment when you feel frustrated or angry, it can be hard to stop and ask yourself what Jesus might do in that situation. But it's important to press pause, take a breath, and then choose to respond in a humble way. What would Jesus do? He would choose humility. He already did choose humility for you and me. Now, in our normal everyday lives with the people we see every day, we can follow Jesus' example and we can put others first. Oh, you want to play through? Come on ahead of me. See you next time, guys.